Captain Sarah Mitchell had logged 18,427 flight hours over 20 years, and she'd learned to trust her instincts long before the instruments started screaming. The shudder came first, a deep, wrong vibration that traveled up through the throttle controls and into her bones. It was 2:47 p.m. Pacific Time, and Trans-Pacific Flight 447 was cruising at 39,000 feet, somewhere over the vast blue emptiness between California and Hawaii. "Did you feel that?" First Officer James Park asked, his hand instinctively moving to the center console. Before Sarah could answer, the cockpit exploded with warnings. Master caution lights blazed amber, then red. Hydraulic system 1 failure. The words glowed accusingly on her primary flight display. Sarah's heart rate kicked up, but her hands remained steady, muscle memory from 2 decades of training taking over. "Center hydraulics," she commanded, her voice crisp and professional. Park's fingers flew across the overhead panel, initiating the backup system. For 5 seconds, the warnings cleared. Sarah allowed herself one breath of relief. Then the backup failed. Hydraulic system 2 failure. Hydraulic system 3 failure. The cascading failures came like dominoes falling, each one stealing another piece of their ability to control the massive Boeing 777. Sarah felt the yoke go mushy in her hands, that sickening, loose sensation that every pilot dreads. It was like trying to steer a car with severed brake lines and a snapped steering column, except they were 7 miles above the Pacific Ocean with 183 souls behind them. "Oakland Center, Transpac 447 declaring emergency," Park transmitted, his voice tight but controlled. "We have complete hydraulic failure. All 3 systems. We are losing flight control authority." In the cabin, 42 families were scattered across the seats. Row 23 held Emily Chen, a grandmother from Sacramento, traveling with her 8-year-old grandson Michael to visit his parents in Honolulu. The boy was showing her photos on his tablet, excited about snorkeling with sea turtles. Row 15 held newlyweds Daniel and Rebecca Martinez, returning from their honeymoon in Los Angeles, her head resting on his shoulder as they dozed. In the back, Marine Sergeant Marcus Webb sat in his dress blues, coming home from his 3rd deployment, fingering the small box in his pocket that contained a necklace for his 4-year-old daughter. Near the front, 18 high school students from Lincoln Academy in Oregon were on an educational trip, chaperoned by their science teacher, Mr. Robert Hayes. They'd spent the last hour arguing enthusiastically about marine biology and who would see a manta ray first. In row 31, a group of 7 cancer survivors and their families were heading to a charity retreat, people who'd fought death once already and thought they'd won. None of them knew they were aboard a dying aircraft. Sarah tried the flight controls again. The 777 responded sluggishly, like pushing through mud. Elevator control maybe 10%. Rudder almost nothing. Ailerons barely functional. The aircraft was essentially a 300-ton glider with engines, and even that was being generous. "We're descending," Park said, watching the altimeter unwind. 38,500 feet. 38,000 feet. The rate of descent was accelerating. "Sarah, we can't maintain altitude." She knew. The Boeing 777 was one of the most advanced aircraft in the world, with triple redundant hydraulic systems specifically designed, so this exact scenario could never happen. Except it was happening. Later, investigators would discover a cascade failure initiated by a microscopic crack in a hydraulic line, exacerbated by a faulty pressure sensor that had been missed during the last 3 inspections. A perfect storm of mechanical failure and human error. But Sarah didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was that gravity was winning. "Oakland Center, we need immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport," Park transmitted. "We are dead sticking a 777. The controller's voice came back, and Sarah could hear the barely suppressed panic beneath his professional tone. "Transpac 447, Nearest suitable runway is San Francisco International, bearing 045, distance 427 nautical miles. Sarah did the math in her head. At their current rate of descent, they'd hit the ocean in approximately 12 minutes. San Francisco was at least 30 minutes away, even if they could maintain altitude, which they couldn't. "We won't make it," she said quietly to Park. Behind them in the cabin, passengers were starting to notice something was wrong. The aircraft's unusual attitude, the slight but persistent vibration, the way the horizon tilted outside the windows. A baby started crying in row 18. Emily Chen gripped her grandson's hand tighter, maternal instinct sensing danger before logic could process it. Then the oxygen masks dropped. The yellow panels above each row snapped open, and 183 oxygen masks tumbled down on their elastic cords, swaying like hangman's nooses. Screams erupted. Children cried. Adults grabbed for the masks with shaking hands, remembering the safety briefings they'd half-listened to during boarding. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain," Sarah announced, her voice projected through the PA system with a calmness she didn't feel. "We are experiencing a technical issue and are descending to a lower altitude as a precaution. Please place your oxygen masks over your nose and mouth and breathe normally. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." Technical issue. It was the understatement of her career. Lead flight attendant Marcus Rivera moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, helping passengers with masks, checking seatbelts, his mind racing through the emergency protocols. He'd been flying for 15 years and had never seen masks deploy outside of maintenance checks. His eyes met Sarah's through the cockpit door window for just a moment, a silent exchange between professionals who both knew they might be counting their last minutes. Oakland Center was now patching them through to every military asset within 500 miles. Coast Guard cutters were being alerted. Search and rescue teams were spinning up, but everyone knew the grim mathematics. A Boeing 777 couldn't glide far enough, couldn't land on water successfully, couldn't survive what was coming. Sarah's hands gripped the yoke, feeling the sluggish response of the dying aircraft. Somewhere beneath them, the Pacific Ocean waited, cold, dark, and patient. She thought of her daughter's college graduation next month, of her husband's face that morning when she'd kissed him goodbye, of the 183 people behind her who trusted her with their lives. "Keep trying everything," she told Park. "We're not dead yet." But in her heart, as the altimeter spun downward through 35,000 feet, Sarah Mitchell knew they needed a miracle. And miracles, she'd learned in 20 years of flying, were in very short supply at 39,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean. Then the radio crackled with a voice that would change everything. Major Kyle Brennan felt the G-forces press him into his ejection seat as his F-22 Raptor carved through the crystalline sky at 45,000 feet. It was a perfect day for flying. Unlimited visibility, calm winds, the kind of conditions that made you remember why you'd wanted to be a fighter pilot since you were 6 years old. His wingman, Captain Lisa Torres, flew in perfect formation off his right wing, her Raptor's sleek profile cutting through the air like a blade. They were 90 minutes into what was supposed to be a routine training exercise out of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Alaska. Basic maneuvers, intercept drills, nothing complicated. Brennan was already thinking about the burger he'd grab at the base commissary when they landed. Then the emergency frequency crackled to life. "All military aircraft, all military aircraft. This is Oakland Center with a Priority 1 emergency." The controller's voice was tight, professional, but Brennan could hear the underlying current of desperation. "We have Trans-Pacific Flight 447, Boeing 777, complete hydraulic failure, 183 souls on board, descending through flight level 350. Aircraft is approximately 280 nautical miles west-southwest of Crescent City, California. Any aircraft in position to render assistance, Please respond immediately. Brennan's hand instinctively moved to his communication panel. He exchanged a glance through his canopy at Tors. Even at this distance, he could see her helmet turn toward him, could imagine her face behind the visor. They both knew what complete hydraulic failure meant on a commercial airliner. It meant people were about to die. Oakland Center, this is Raptor 21 Flight of 2, F-22s out of Elmendorf, Brennan transmitted. We're approximately 340 miles northeast of the emergency aircraft. We can be on station in 12 minutes. What assistance can we provide? There was a pause too long. Brennan had worked with air traffic controllers enough to know that silence meant they were scrambling for options that didn't exist. Raptor 21, at this time we have no procedures for fighter assistance to a commercial aircraft in this situation. Stand by. Translation, we have nothing. You can watch them die up close, but you can't save them. Brennan checked his fuel ran calculations. They had enough to reach the stricken 777, enough to orbit for maybe 20 minutes, enough to watch it auger into the Pacific and mark the location for search and rescue. His jaw clenched. 15 years of flying the most advanced fighter jet ever built, and he was powerless to save 183 people. 2-1, this is 2-2, Tor's voice came through on their discrete frequency. There has to be something we can do. Like what, Lisa? We can't tow them, we can't land them, we can't. The radio erupted with a new voice. Oakland Center, this is Ghost Rider Actual. The voice was calm, authoritative, with the gravelly edge of experience and cigarettes long quit. I have situational awareness on Transpac 447. I am scrambling from my location now. ETA to intercept. 8 minutes. Brennan's hand froze on his throttle. Tors actually jerked her Raptor slightly out of formation, a rookie mistake she never made, before correcting. At Oakland Center, controller David Martinez stared at his screen like it had just displayed his own death certificate. His coffee mug slipped from his fingers, hit the desk, and sprayed lukewarm liquid across his keyboard. The other controllers in the room stopped mid-sentence, heads snapping toward the speaker. Say again your call sign. Martinez's voice cracked slightly. Ghost Rider Actual, I have the situation. Proceeding to intercept Transpac 447. Martinez's supervisor, a gray-haired veteran named Patricia Coleman, grabbed his shoulder. Her face had gone sheet white. That's impossible, she whispered. Ghost Rider was Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne is dead. I went to his goddamn funeral. She had gone to the funeral. September 17, 2019, at Arlington National Cemetery. Full military honors, 21-gun salute. An F-15 missing man formation flying overhead. They'd buried an empty casket. The story went that there wasn't enough of Colonel Marcus Reaper Thorne left to bury after his F-15 had disintegrated during a training exercise over the Nevada desert. 1,200 people had attended. His wife had wept. His 2 sons, both Air Force officers themselves, had stood stone-faced and shattered. Patricia had been there because Thorne had saved her brother's life in Iraq in 2003, flying close air support when his Marine unit was pinned down. She'd sent flowers every year to his widow on the anniversary of his death. And now his voice was on her frequency. Oakland Center, Ghost Rider Actual, do you copy? The voice came again, patient but urgent. Brennan broke in on the emergency frequency. Ghost Rider Actual, this is Raptor 21. Authenticate your identity. What aircraft type are you flying? What is your point of origin? Raptor 21, I'm flying an F-15X Strike Eagle out of a facility I can't disclose on this frequency. And Major Brennan, yes, I know who you are. I don't have time for 20 questions. I have a solution for Transpac 447, but I need you and your wingman on station providing support. Are you in, or are you going to waste time asking me how I'm not dead? Lisa Torres' voice cut through. How the hell do you know Brennan's name? Who are you really? Captain Tors, your father served with me in the 85th Fighter Squadron. Good man, terrible poker player. Right now, I need you to trust that I'm the crazy son of a bitch who might actually save those 183 people. Your choice. Help me, or watch them die while you verify my credentials." Brennan's mind raced. Marcus Thorne had been a legend, one of the best fighter pilots of his generation, with kills in 2 wars and a reputation for doing the impossible. He'd also been known for bending rules when lives were on the line, which had made him both celebrated and controversial. But he was dead. There had been wreckage. There had been DNA evidence. There had been a funeral with full honors. Yet something in that voice, the confidence, the specific knowledge, the absolute certainty, made Brennan's instincts scream that this was real. "Oakland Center, Raptor 2-1, Brennan transmitted. "We're proceeding to intercept Transpac 447. If Ghost Rider Actual is en route, we'll coordinate with him on station." He switched to his discreet channel with Tors. "Lisa, I know this is insane, but—" "I'm with you," she interrupted. "My dad did serve with someone named Marcus Thorne. He talked about him like he was some kind of flying wizard. If there's even a chance this is real." "Then we're about to see a ghost," Brennan finished. He pushed his throttles forward, the Raptor's engines responding with a roar of raw power. Beside him, Tors matched his acceleration. Below them, somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific, 183 people were falling toward death. And somewhere ahead, impossibly, a dead man was flying to meet them. In Oakland Center, Patricia Coleman stood frozen, staring at the radio speaker. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled through her contacts to a number she hadn't called in years, Thorne's widow, Jennifer. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. "Hello. Jenny, it's Patricia Coleman. I need to ask you something crazy. Is Marcus really dead?" There was a long pause, then so quietly Patricia almost missed it. "You heard him, didn't you?" "What?" "On the radio, you heard Ghost Rider." Jennifer Thorne's voice was steady, resigned, like she'd been waiting for this call for years. "I can't tell you anything, Patricia. I signed papers, but no, I never got to bury my husband. Just a flag and a folded uniform and 4 years of lies." The line went dead. Patricia looked up at the radar screen showing Transpac 447 steady descent toward the ocean, and at the new transponder contact accelerating toward it from the east. No call sign, no identification, just a fast-moving target that shouldn't exist. "God help us all," she whispered. "We're trusting a ghost." Colonel Marcus Reaper Thorne's hands moved across the pre-flight checklist with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd flown over 6,000 combat hours. But his hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from age and the arthritis that had started creeping into his knuckles 3 years ago. At 58 years old, he was supposed to be retired, supposed to be playing golf and bouncing grandchildren on his knee. Instead, he was strapping into an F-15X Strike Eagle painted matte black with no markings, no tail numbers, no identification whatsoever. The aircraft sat in a hangar carved into the side of a mountain in Oregon's Cascade Range, a facility so classified it didn't appear on any map, any budget, any congressional briefing. "Welcome to Project Guardian Angel. Welcome to being dead." The facility's alarm klaxons were already wailing. Through his helmet speakers, Thorne could hear his commanding officer, a faceless voice from DARPA headquarters, screaming orders. "Ghost Rider, you are not cleared for launch. Stand down immediately. Thorne, this is a direct order. You launch that aircraft and your career is over. We will prosecute you to the full extent of military law." Thorne's finger hovered over the engine start switches. He'd spent 4 years in this mountain, 4 years testing experimental flight control systems that didn't officially exist, 4 years being legally dead while his wife Jennifer collected his pension, and his sons grew up believing their father had died a hero. The deal had been simple: fake his death, disappear into DARPA's black world, help develop systems that could save lives in impossible situations. In exchange, his family would be taken care of, his legacy preserved, and when the project ended, if it ever ended, maybe he could come back. Maybe. He'd accepted because Marcus Thorne had always been a man who couldn't walk away when he could help. It was what made him a great pilot. It was also what destroyed his first marriage, nearly killed him a dozen times, and ultimately led him here, to a fake grave in Arlington and a real cockpit in a mountain. Through his headset, he could hear the civilian emergency frequency. Transpac Flight 447, complete hydraulic failure, 183 souls, 12 minutes before impact. He'd been monitoring civilian aviation channels from his station, a habit that violated a dozen security protocols, when he'd heard the emergency call. The numbers had flashed through his mind immediately. Descent rate, glide ratio, distance to nearest runway. The mathematics of death. But also the mathematics of possibility. His F-15X wasn't just a fighter jet. It was a flying laboratory, equipped with experimental adaptive flight control systems, thrust vectoring nozzles that could manipulate airflow in ways no production aircraft could match, and pressure wave generators originally designed for weapons testing. The systems had been developed to help damaged aircraft maintain control, to create aerodynamic effects that could compensate for battle damage or system failures. In theory, those systems could create pressure waves powerful enough to help stabilize a larger aircraft. In theory, a formation of fighters could use combined aerodynamic effects to essentially catch a falling airliner. In theory, computer simulations gave it a 38% success rate. The test pilot's unofficial assessment: crazy, impossible, and probably lethal. Marcus had helped design those systems. He'd run the simulations. He'd even proposed a test using a modified cargo aircraft, but the Pentagon had deemed it too dangerous, too expensive, too risky for something that would likely never be needed. Now it was needed. Colonel Thorne, listened to me very carefully. The DARPA commander's voice softened slightly, taking on a negotiating tone. What you're proposing is impossible. You'll kill yourself and probably make the situation worse. Let the Coast Guard handle this. Let the system work. The system, Thorne's voice was quiet, deadly. The system is letting 183 people die because we're too scared to try the impossible. That's not the Air Force I joined, Colonel. You're not in the Air Force anymore, Thorne. You're dead, remember. You launch that aircraft, you expose this entire program. For years of work, billions in development costs, strategic advantages we can't afford to lose, all gone. For what? A suicide mission with a 38% success rate. Thorne's eyes flicked to the photo taped to his instrument panel. His wife Jennifer, his sons Marcus Jr. and David, both in their Air Force dress uniforms, taken at Marcus Jr.'s wedding. A wedding Thorne had watched via encrypted video feed from this very mountain, unable to attend, unable to even let them know he was alive. 4 years of missing birthdays, holidays, graduations. 4 years of letting the people he loved most think he was dead. 4 years of sacrifice for the greater good. And for what? So he could sit in a mountain while 183 people drowned in the Pacific, because saving them wasn't convenient for the budget. I've been dead for 4 years, Thorne said softly. What's dying for real if it means something? He flipped the engine start switches. The twin Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines spooled to life with a sound like controlled thunder. In the hangar, maintenance crews scattered as Thorne's F-15X began rolling toward the concealed launch doors. Behind him, automated systems were already sealing the facility, trying to stop him, but Thorne had helped design the security protocols. He knew every override, every backdoor. The mountain's camouflaged doors split open, revealing a runway carved into the mountainside. 2 400 feet of concrete angled downward toward the valley below. Not much runway for a fully loaded F-15, but Thorne didn't need much. "Thorne Gothamnit, stand down." The commander was screaming now, abandoning all pretense of calm authority. "Ghost Rider Actual is wheels up," Thorne replied, his voice carrying the same calm certainty it had carried over Baghdad, over Afghanistan, over 100 combat missions. "If I survive this, you can court-martial me. If I don't, well, I'm already dead, remember." He released the brakes. The F-15X surged forward, accelerating down the mountain runway, engines howling at full military power. At the runway's edge, the point where concrete met a 500-foot drop into the valley, Thorne pulled back on the stick. The fighter leaped into the sky like it had been shot from a cannon. Behind him, alarms screamed. Automated systems locked down the facility. Security teams scrambled. The DARPA commander was probably already on the phone with the Pentagon, trying to explain how a dead pilot had just stolen a $120 million experimental aircraft to attempt an unauthorized rescue mission. None of it mattered. Thorne punched the afterburners, feeling the familiar kick as the F-15 went supersonic. His heads-up display painted the tactical picture. Transpac 447, descending through 31,000 feet, 240 miles away. Two F-22 Raptors, Brennan and Tors, converging from the north. Weather clear. Sea state moderate. Everything was perfect except for the part where this had never been successfully tested, with a real aircraft in real conditions, with real lives at stake. "Oakland Center, Ghost Rider Actual," he transmitted. 8 minutes to intercept. Have those Raptor pilots contact me on secure tactical frequency. We're going to do something that's never been done before." His fuel gauge showed full tanks, enough for maybe 40 minutes of high-intensity flying. Not enough to get back to the mountain. Probably not enough to make any friendly airfield after what he was about to do. Marcus Thorne had died once in 2019, buried with full honors while his family wept. Today, he thought grimly, he might die for real. But 183 people wouldn't die with him. He pushed the throttles to maximum and dove toward the Pacific, a ghost riding the edge of physics and faith, racing against mathematics and time. The impossible was about to become real. Captain Sarah Mitchell watched her altimeter unwind through 28,000 feet and tried not to think about the physics of a Boeing 777 hitting water at 400 miles per hour. Behind the cockpit door, 183 people were living their last minutes, and most of them didn't even know it yet. 37,000 pounds of fuel remaining, First Officer James Park reported, his voice mechanical, divorced from emotion. It was a coping mechanism. Focus on the numbers, not on the children crying in row 23, not on the woman in 15B praying in Spanish, not on the Marine in dress blues silently writing a letter to his daughter on a cocktail napkin, because he knew he'd never get to tell her he loved her in person. Then Sarah's radio crackled with a voice that carried the kind of calm authority that only came from someone who'd stared down death so many times they were on first-name basis. "Transpac 447, this is Ghost Rider Actual. I'm 2 minutes from your position. How's your control authority?" Sarah keyed her mic. "Ghost Rider, we have maybe 10% elevator control, 5% rudder. Ailerons are almost non-responsive. We're a brick with engines. Who are you and what can you possibly do to help us?" "I'm someone who's been dead for 4 years, Captain, which means I've got nothing left to lose and everything to prove. I'm about to try something that's never been successfully tested outside of computer simulations. You trust me?" Sarah barked a laugh that was half hysteria, half desperation. "I'm flying a dying plane with 183 souls aboard. Trust is all I've got left." "Good answer, stand by." In row 31, cancer survivor Patricia Drummond held her husband Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. They'd met in chemotherapy 3 years ago, both fighting stage 4 lymphoma, both given less than 6 months to live. They'd beaten the odds together, fallen in love in hospital rooms, gotten married in a chapel with IV poles as decorations. They were supposed to have decades left, not minutes. "I'm scared," she whispered. Robert kissed her forehead. "We beat cancer, Patty. We can beat this." But his voice shook, and they both knew he was lying. 8 rows ahead, Grandmother Emily Chen was telling her grandson Michael a story about dragons and brave knights, her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The boy's eyes were wide, trusting, completely unaware that his grandmother was trying to distract him from the fact that they were falling from the sky. "And then the dragon swooped down," Emily said, making her hand dive through the air, and caught the princess before she could fall into the dark ocean. Michael giggled. "Dragons aren't real, Grandma." "Maybe not," Emily said softly, staring out the window at the endless blue below. "But sometimes we get miracles anyway." At that exact moment, 3 fighter jets appeared in formation around the Boeing 777. Major Kyle Brennan's F-22 Raptor took position off the 777's left wing, so close he could see the rivets on the aluminum skin, could see passengers' faces pressed against the windows, mouths open in shock and awe. Captain Lisa Torres positioned herself off the right wing, her Raptor's sleek profile impossibly graceful next to the wallowing commercial jet. And then Ghost Rider arrived. Marcus Thorne's matte black F-15 X-Strike Eagle swept up from below, climbing with a precision that made Brennan's jaw drop. The experimental fighter positioned itself directly behind and slightly below the 777's tail section, so close that Torres actually gasped over the radio. "Ghost Rider, you're inside 50 feet of his tail, 1 wind shear and you'll—" "I know what I'm doing, Captain." Thorne's voice was granite steady. "Transpac 447, this is Ghost Rider. I need you to listen very carefully because we're only going to get 1 shot at this." Inside the 777's cockpit, Sarah Mitchell was staring at her instruments and the visual of 3 military fighters in impossibly tight formation around her dying aircraft. "I'm listening. Your hydraulics are gone, but your engines are fine, which means you have thrust and you have some aerodynamic control surfaces still physically attached to the airframe. They're just not responding to your inputs because the hydraulic actuators are dead. What I'm about to do is use my aircraft and the 2 Raptors to create artificial pressure zones around your wings and tail section." Brennan cut in. "You're talking about formation aerodynamics, using our jets to create high and low pressure zones that'll effectively give her control surfaces back." "Exactly. The F-22's thrust vectoring and my experimental systems can manipulate airflow precisely enough to create pressure differentials across her wings and stabilizers. We essentially become her hydraulic system, but made of air and physics instead of fluid and metal." There was a long pause. Torres spoke first. That's insane. The margin for error is millimeters. 1 mistake and we clip her wing, or she clips us, or the turbulence from our jets puts her into a spin she can't recover from." "Correct," Thorne said calmly. "Which is why we're not going to make mistakes. Major Brennan, I've reviewed your file. You've logged 3,200 hours in the Raptor, including 180 combat sorties. You can hold formation in your sleep. Captain Torres, you were #1 in your class at weapons school and you've flown 3 air show demonstrations. You have the precision we need. And me? I've been dead for 4 years practicing the impossible. This is what we trained for." Sarah Mitchell's voice cut through. "Gentlemen, lady, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm holding a jet that's barely responding to my inputs. How exactly do I coordinate with you when I can barely control this bird?" "You don't control it, Captain, I do." Thorne's words hung in the air like a challenge. "You're going to hand over aircraft command to me. I'll call every input, throttle adjustments, control surface movements, everything. You become my hands on the yoke while I become your control surfaces. We fly this bird together with Brennan and Tors as our wings. 4 aircraft, 1 organism, 1 chance. You want me to fly my aircraft based on radio calls from a fighter pilot I can't even see? Sarah's voice rose slightly. Do you understand how insane that sounds? Ma'am, I watched my own funeral on classified video feed while eating a sandwich in a mountain bunker 4 years ago. I'm well acquainted with insane. But right now, insane is the only chance those 183 people have. Including, he paused, checking his data feed, including 18 high school students, 7 cancer survivors, 1 Marine coming home to his daughter, and a grandmother in row 23 telling her grandson stories about dragons. Sarah felt ice water flood her veins. How do you know that? Because I hacked your passenger manifest while flying supersonic, Captain. I know every soul on that aircraft. I know their names, their ages, their stories. I know that Emily Chen in row 23 survived breast cancer twice. I know that Sergeant Marcus Webb's daughter is named Sophie and she's waiting for him at Pearl Harbor. I know that Daniel and Rebecca Martinez in row 15 just got married last Saturday. His voice grew quieter, more intense. I know all of them because if I'm asking you to trust me with their lives, I better damn well know who they are. In the cabin, passengers were now pressed against windows, staring at the 3 fighter jets in impossibly tight formation. Some were crying. Others were filming on their phones, probably futile given they'd likely never get to share the footage, but humans always hope, always document, always believe in tomorrow. Michael Chen tugged his grandmother's sleeve. Grandma, look, it's like your story, the dragons came. Emily stared at the sleek fighters holding station around their dying aircraft, tears streaming down her face. Yes, baby, the dragons came. Brennan broke the silence on the tactical frequency. Ghost Rider, I'm in, Tors. This is either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done, Tors said. I'm in. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Sarah Mitchell. First Officer Park looked at her, his face pale but determined. Sarah, it's your call, but we're out of altitude and out of options. Sarah looked at her altimeter, 24,000 feet. Descent rate, 1,400 feet per minute. Time to impact, approximately 17 minutes. San Francisco still impossibly far away, the ocean below growing closer with every passing second. She keyed her mic. Ghost Rider Actual, this is Transpac 447. I'm handing you my aircraft. Don't make me regret this. I've been dead once already, Captain, Thorne replied. I'm not keen on killing 183 other people in the process of staying that way. Let's fly. 4 aircraft, 3 fighters and 1 dying giant, became one entity at 24,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The impossible was about to become survival. Or they were all about to die together. 447, reduce throttle on engine number 1 by 3%. Now. Marcus Thorne's voice came through Sarah Mitchell's headset with the calm precision of a surgeon calling for a scalpel. Her hand moved to the throttle levers, pulling back the left engine's power setting exactly as commanded. She felt wrong doing it. Every instinct screamed that she should be in control of her own aircraft, but she'd made her choice. Trust the ghost or die with 183 souls. Engine 1, 3% reduction, she confirmed. Good, now I need a 2-degree right aileron input. Don't fight me when nothing happens, just hold the input. Sarah pushed the yoke right. The control surfaces didn't respond, at least not the way they normally would. But she held the input, her muscles tense, waiting. Raptor 2-2. Increase your distance from the starboard wing by 18 inches and vector your thrust 4 degrees outboard. Captain Lisa Tors, F-22, adjusted so minutely that an untrained observer wouldn't even notice the movement. But the effect was immediate. The pressure wave from her Raptor's exhaust, combined with the high-pressure zone created by her airframe, pushed against the 777's right wing. The massive airliner began to bank right. Holy, First Officer James Park breathed, watching the attitude indicator respond. It's actually working. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the aircraft level out slightly. The sickening, uncontrolled descent smoothed into something that almost felt like normal flight. Almost. In row 23, Emily Chen felt her grandson's grip on her hand relax just a fraction. "Grandma, the plane feels better," Michael said, hope creeping into his 8-year-old voice. Emily didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded and kept her eyes on the fighter jets visible through the window, these impossible guardian angels made of metal and thrust and human courage. Marcus Thorne's heads-up display was a nightmare of data streams. His experimental flight control system was processing aerodynamic calculations in real time, measuring air pressure, wind speed, the 777's attitude, rate of descent, and 1,000 other variables. The system fed him constant adjustments: move 3 feet closer, shift thrust vector 2 degrees, increase power by 1%. But the system was only as good as the pilot flying it. And Thorne was flying on pure instinct developed over 6,000 hours of combat, hundreds of hours testing these exact systems, and the kind of muscle memory that came from living and breathing aviation for 40 years. Raptor 2-1, I need you to move forward, position yourself along the leading edge of the port wing, distance 22 feet, Thorne commanded. Major Kyle Brennan's Raptor slid forward with millimeter precision. His closure rate was measured in inches per second. Too fast and he'd overshoot, disrupting the delicate pressure balance. Too slow and the 777 would start to roll before he could compensate. Sweat ran down inside Brennan's flight suit, despite the cockpit's temperature control. He'd flown combat missions over Syria, intercepted Russian bombers near Alaskan airspace, landed on aircraft carriers in storms. But nothing compared to flying formation 15 feet from a crippled airliner full of civilians while trying to become a human control surface. 23 feet, 22 feet. Holding, Brennan reported, his voice tight with concentration. Perfect. Now vector your thrust 6 degrees toward the fuselage. We're going to create a high-pressure zone that'll help her maintain level flight. The Raptor's thrust vectoring nozzles adjusted. The jet wash, carefully directed, created a cushion of compressed air against the 777's wing. Combined with Tor's positioning on the opposite side and Thorne's pressure manipulation from behind, they were essentially holding the massive airliner in a cradle of aerodynamic force. Mitchell, throttle adjustment. Increase engine 3 by 4%, decrease engine 2 by 2%. Sarah's hands moved smoothly across the throttle levers. The differential thrust helped compensate for the aircraft's tendency to yaw left. She was beginning to understand the dance. Thorne was using every tool available. Thrust from 4 engines, whatever minimal control surface movement she had, and the aerodynamic effects from 3 fighter jets to create a composite flight control system made of physics and faith. Descent rate is slowing, Park reported, watching the vertical speed indicator. We're down to 800 feet per minute. We were at 1,400 just 5 minutes ago. In the cabin, lead flight attendant Marcus Rivera moved through the aisles, checking on passengers, offering quiet reassurance. In row 31, cancer survivor Patricia Drummond was crying openly now, but they were tears of hope rather than despair. "Robert, I think we might actually make it," she whispered to her husband. "Don't jinx it," he whispered back, but he was smiling through his own tears. In row 15, newlyweds Daniel and Rebecca Martinez held each other, watching the F-22 visible through their window holding position with impossible precision. Daniel had been an engineering student before switching to business. He understood enough aerodynamics to realize what he was witnessing was theoretically impossible. "They're using formation aerodynamics to create artificial control surfaces," he murmured, awe in his voice. "The pressure waves from their jets. It's like they're physically holding us up. Rebecca kissed his cheek. I don't care how they're doing it, I just care that they are. Back in the cockpit, Thorne was issuing a constant stream of micro-adjustments. 2-1, close by 6 inches. 2-2, drop altitude by 12 feet. Mitchell, 2-degree left rudder input. Yes, I know it won't do anything by itself, hold it steady. The formation became a living thing, breathing, adjusting, compensating for every gust of wind, every atmospheric pressure change, every subtle shift in the 777's aerodynamics as fuel burned off and weight decreased. Then the wind shear hit. It came from nowhere, a sudden crosswind at 22,000 feet, a 40-knot gust that slammed into the formation like an invisible fist. The 777 lurched violently to the left. Tor's Raptor was suddenly too close to the wing, closure rate spiking. Brennan's carefully maintained position was disrupted. The delicate balance of pressure zones collapsed. Brake right, Thorne shouted, his voice losing its calm for the first time. Tor's yanked her stick, afterburners lighting as she pulled away from the 777's wing with maybe 3 feet of clearance. Brennan dove below and away, his Raptor's wings nearly clipping the airliner's belly. Inside the cabin, passengers screamed as the aircraft rolled hard left, the ocean suddenly visible through the right side windows, impossibly close, impossibly blue. Sarah fought the controls, getting nothing, the aircraft falling, rolling, dying. Mitchell, full right aileron, full right rudder now. Thorne's command cut through the chaos. She slammed the controls right even though they barely responded. But those minimal control surfaces, combined with Thorne's F-15, vectoring its entire thrust perpendicular to his fuselage, a maneuver that should have sent him into an unrecoverable flat spin, created just enough force. The 777's roll stopped, reversed. Slowly, agonizingly, the wings came back to level. 2122, reform on my mark, 3-2-1, mark. Brennan and Torres swept back into position like they'd been shot from rails, their Raptors resuming their stations with a precision that defied physics and sanity. The pressure cage reformed around the stricken airliner. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the 777 stabilized. Jesus Christ, Park whispered, his hands shaking on his control column. Sarah's voice was hoarse. Ghost Rider, what the hell was that? That, Thorne replied, his voice steady again but with an edge of steel, was wind shear, and it's going to happen again. This is the Pacific, the winds don't play nice. Everybody stay sharp, we've got. He checked his navigation display, 14 minutes to Crescent City Airport, and I've got 18 minutes of fuel. The mathematics were getting tighter. Brennan keyed his mic. Ghost Rider, if you run out of fuel. Then you and Torres better be good enough to hold this formation without me, Major. Now stop talking and keep flying. We're not losing these people. Not today. Not ever. 4 aircraft continued their impossible dance at 21,000 feet, falling in controlled descent toward a runway that was still 140 miles away, racing against fuel, physics, and the patient mathematics of death. In row 23, grandmother Emily Chen held her grandson close and watched the fighter jets hold their position with unwavering precision. The dragons won't let us fall, she whispered. Promise? Michael asked. Emily watched the matte black F-15 behind them, so close she could see the pilot's helmet through the canopy. Promise, she said, and surprised herself by believing it. Marcus Thorne's fuel gauge read critical in angry red letters. His master caution panel was lit up like a Christmas tree, warning screaming that he had maybe 90 seconds of fuel remaining before his engines would start eating themselves and flame out completely. The F-15X's computer was practically begging him to break off, find the nearest airfield, save himself. He ignored it. Fuel state critical, he reported calmly on the tactical frequency, as if he were commenting on the weather rather than his impending death. I have approximately 2 minutes of flight time remaining. In her F-22, Captain Lisa Torres felt her stomach drop. Ghost Rider, you need to break off now. Find an airfield, we can. You can what, Captain? Thorne's voice was gentle but firm. You and Brennan can hold this formation without my pressure manipulation from behind, without my thrust vectoring creating the stability zones that keep her from Dutch rolling into the ocean. Silence on the radio. They all knew the answer. The formation required 3 aircraft positioned precisely. 2 wouldn't be enough. The 777 would become uncontrollable again, and 183 people would die. How far to Crescent City? Thorne asked, though his instruments already told him the answer. 87 nautical miles, Major Kyle Brennan replied, his voice tight. At our current rate of descent and ground speed, 11 minutes. And I have 2 minutes of fuel. Thorne laughed, a short, dark sound that carried no humor. Well, I've faced worse odds. That time over Fallujah when I had 3 SAMs tracking me, 4 MiGs on my 6 and enough fuel for maybe 1 hard turn before I was gliding. Made it out of that. How? Torres asked, desperate for hope. I didn't, Thorne said quietly. I ran out of fuel, ejected, got picked up by a Marine patrol and spent 3 days in a field hospital. But I was the only one at risk that day. Today's different. Today I've got 183 people counting on me to not eject. In the cockpit of Transpac 447, Captain Sarah Mitchell was listening to every word. Her hands gripped the yoke so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Ghost Rider, you can't. There has to be another way. Captain, I've been flying for 40 years. I've learned that sometimes there isn't another way. Sometimes you just fly until you can't fly anymore and you trust that it'll be enough. He paused, checking his fuel one more time. Besides, I died 4 years ago, remember. I've been living on borrowed time ever since. First Officer James Park's voice cracked as he spoke. 37,000 feet of altitude when we started. We're at 18,000 now, if we can just... We can, Thorne interrupted. We will, but I need absolute precision from everyone. Mitchell, I'm going to talk you through a series of power adjustments that'll maximize our glide ratio. Brennan, Torres, you're going to have to hold formation tighter than you've ever held in your lives because when my engines quit, there's going to be a pressure disruption. You'll have maybe 3 seconds to compensate before the 777 becomes uncontrollable. Inside the cabin, passengers had gone silent. The initial panic had faded into a strange, suspended tension. They could see the fighter jets through the windows, could sense something was wrong by the way the aircraft trembled occasionally, by the grim expressions on the flight attendants' faces. In row 12, high school science teacher Robert Hayes sat with his 18 students. Most were crying quietly. Some were texting parents, messages that might never send, final words in case the impossible became inevitable. Hayes found himself thinking about his own daughter, 7 years old, who'd kissed him goodbye 3 days ago. Mr. Hayes, one of his students, a brilliant girl named Amanda Chen, whispered, "What are those jets doing? It looks like they're holding us up." Hayes was a physicist by training before he became a teacher. He understood the principles at work, even if he'd never imagined seeing them applied this way. They are, Amanda. They're using aerodynamic pressure to give us back control we lost. It's extraordinary. Are we going to die? Hayes looked at her, 16 years old, straight-A student, full scholarship to MIT already secured, her whole life ahead of her. He thought about lying, about offering false comfort, but she deserved truth. I don't know, he said quietly, but those pilots out there, they're doing something impossible to save us, so I think we owe it to them to believe we're going to make it. Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her face, and gripped his hand. In the cockpit, Thorne's fuel warning went from angry red to emergency, flashing white and red, the worst warning a pilot can see. 60 seconds of fuel, he reported. Mitchell, Reduce power on all engines to 70%. We're trading airspeed for glide distance. It's going to feel wrong, but trust me." Sarah pulled back all four throttles. The 777's descent rate increased slightly, but their forward speed maintained. Thorne was right. The glide ratio improved. "Crescent City Airport is at our 12 o'clock, 62 miles, Brennan reported. "They've foamed the runway, deployed every emergency vehicle they have, and cleared all traffic within 50 miles. "Won't matter if we don't get there," Torres muttered. Thorne's engines began to cough. The first signs of fuel starvation. The compressor blades were sucking vapor instead of JP-8. His aircraft shuddered. Inside his flight suit, Thorne was soaked with sweat despite the cockpit's cooling system. His arthritic hands ached from gripping the stick with such precision for so long. 30 seconds, he said calmly. "When I flame out, there's going to be immediate yaw and pressure disruption. Brennan, you'll need to vector thrust inboard by 8 degrees. Torres, increase your altitude by 20 feet and roll 2 degrees toward the fuselage. That should recreate enough of my pressure zone to keep her stable." "Should," Brennan's voice rose. "We need better than should." "Major, I'm about to become a $120 million glider with the aerodynamic properties of a falling refrigerator. Should is the best we've got." Thorne's left engine quit first. The compressor seized with a grinding shriek, the turbine winding down. The F-15 yawed violently right. Thorne compensated with rudder and aileron, his remaining engine screaming at full power, but he could feel the aircraft dying under him. 10 seconds, he called. "Get ready." In Transpac 447, every passenger felt the sudden turbulence as Thorne's pressure manipulation began to fail. The aircraft lurched, dropped, started to roll. Children screamed. Adults grabbed for armrests, seat backs each other. "Hold on," Sarah shouted to Park, fighting controls that were again becoming unresponsive. Thorne's right engine flamed out. Both engines dead. The F-15X became dead weight at 17,000 feet, its nose dropping as it lost thrust. But Marcus Thorne, Colonel Marcus Reaper Thorne, who'd been declared dead 4 years ago, who'd flown 6,000 combat hours, who'd saved countless lives in 2 wars, held his position for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds where his gliding fighter, positioned perfectly, maintained just enough pressure stability for Brennan and Torres to adjust their positions and compensate. 3 seconds that cost him any chance of a controlled landing, but gave 183 other people their lives back. "Formation stable," Torres shouted. "We've got her, Ghost Rider, get out of there." Thorne's aircraft was dropping away from the 777 now, powerless, a 40,000-pound brick falling toward the Pacific. His ejection handles were right there. Pull them, and he'd be under canopy in 2 seconds, safe, rescued by Coast Guard within the hour. But below him was nothing but ocean. His F-15 would sink, taking with it billions in experimental technology and classified systems. Everything Project Guardian Angel had built for 4 years gone, and he'd be alive but exposed. The program would be compromised. Other lives that might be saved in the future by these systems would be lost. Marcus Thorne had always been a man who calculated costs. "Ghost Rider, eject! Eject!" Brennan was screaming now, watching Thorne's F-15 fall away, spinning slightly, heading for the water. "Negative," Thorne said calmly. "I'm going to try something stupid." Ahead, through his canopy, he could see the California coastline. 20 miles away, maybe. His altimeter read 14,000 feet and falling fast. No engine meant no hydraulics, meant no flight controls except what little the emergency system could provide. But emergency systems could still operate the flaps, and flaps meant lift, and lift meant distance. Marcus Thorne, with no engines and barely any control, aimed his dying fighter jet at a beach 20 miles away and did what he'd always done best. He flew, Captain Sarah Mitchell had landed Boeing 777s in crosswinds, in thunderstorms, on icy runways in Moscow and windswept strips in the Scottish Highlands. She'd handled hydraulic failures in simulators, practiced every emergency procedure in the book until they were burned into her muscle memory. But she'd never landed a 300-ton aircraft with essentially no flight controls, while two F-22 Raptors held her wings in an aerodynamic cage at 200 miles per hour. Crescent City Airport, 12 o'clock, 41 miles, First Officer James Park reported, his voice hoarse from tension. Through the windscreen, they could just barely see the California coastline emerging from the haze, a thin line of land that represented life instead of death. Transpac 447, Crescent City Tower, a new voice crackled through their headset, the airport controller trying to sound professional despite the fear bleeding through. Runway 21 is clear, emergency equipment standing by. Wind is 230 at 8 knots. You're cleared for any approach you can make. Just get them down, Captain. Sarah keyed her mic. Crescent City, understand, cleared any approach. Raptor 2122, I'm going to need you all the way to the runway threshold. Can you hold formation that low? Major Kyle Brennan's response was immediate. Captain, we'll hold formation into hell if that's what it takes. Just tell us what you need. They were at 12,000 feet now, still descending in a controlled glide that was only controlled because two fighter jets were creating invisible hands of compressed air around their wings. Without Ghost Rider's F-15 behind them, the formation was more fragile, more prone to disruption. But Brennan and Torres had adjusted, compensating through sheer skill and determination. Behind the cockpit door, the cabin was a study in controlled terror. Lead flight attendant Marcus Rivera had briefed the passengers on crash position. Heads down, hands clasped behind their heads, brace for impact. But many couldn't stop watching through the windows as the ocean slowly gave way to land, as the coastline grew closer, as the impossible approached reality. In row 23, grandmother Emily Chen had her arms wrapped around 8-year-old Michael, whispering a prayer she hadn't said since her own mother taught it to her 50 years ago. Please God, please let us see tomorrow. Michael's voice was small, frightened, but trying to be brave. Grandma, I can see trees. We're almost to land. Yes, baby, almost there, almost safe. 3 rows back, Marine Sergeant Marcus Webb sat ramrod straight in his dress blues, the photo of his 4-year-old daughter Sophie clutched in his hand. He'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, firefights and IEDs and mortars. He couldn't die on a commercial flight coming home. Sophie was waiting for him at Pearl Harbor with her mother, holding a sign she'd made with crayons that said, "Welcome home, Daddy." He had to see that sign. He had to hold his daughter again. In row 15, newlyweds Daniel and Rebecca Martinez held each other so tightly they'd left marks on each other's arms. They'd been married 6 days. 6 days of being husband and wife. It couldn't end like this. It couldn't. I love you, Daniel whispered into Rebecca's hair. Don't say it like goodbye, she replied fiercely. Say it like a promise. I love you, he repeated, stronger this time. And I'm going to keep loving you for the next 60 years. Sarah's altimeter showed 8,000 feet. The coastline was beneath them now. They'd made it over land. Crescent City Airport appeared ahead, the single runway looking impossibly small, impossibly short. Fire trucks lined both sides of the runway, foam already deployed across the concrete, creating a white pathway that looked almost beautiful in the afternoon sun. 5 miles to runway threshold, Park reported. Rate of descent 600 feet per minute, airspeed 210 knots. Too fast. They were coming in too fast and too steep, but Sarah couldn't adjust much. She had almost no control authority. Raptor 21, can you help me bleed off airspeed? Negative, Captain, Brennan replied, strain evident in his voice. If we disrupt the pressure balance now, you'll lose what little control you have. You're going to have to take this in hot and hope the runway is long enough." Sarah's jaw clenched. Crescent City's runway was 5,000 feet long. A Boeing 777 needed at least 4,500 feet under ideal conditions with full braking and thrust reversers. She had partial thrust reversers at best, no wheel brakes worth mentioning, and she was coming in 30 knots over normal landing speed. The mathematics said they wouldn't make it. But mathematics didn't account for 20 years of experience, for a pilot who'd coaxed dying aircraft to safety before, for a woman who refused to let 183 people die on her watch. 4 miles, Park said. 3 miles. The runway filled their windscreen now. Sarah could see the foam, the emergency vehicles, tiny figures of firefighters and paramedics waiting. Her hands moved across the controls in a dance of micro-adjustments, small throttle changes, tiny control inputs that accomplished almost nothing by themselves, but combined with Brennan and Tor's aerodynamic manipulation, kept them on the glide path. 2 miles, 1 mile. "Gear down," Sarah commanded. Park pulled the landing gear lever. The hydraulic system had just enough residual pressure to drop the massive landing gear, 3 sets of wheels, 12 tires total, slamming into place with mechanical thuds they could feel through the airframe. "Gear down and locked," Park confirmed. "Half-mile to threshold." The ground rushed up at them. Sarah could see individual trees now, cars on the highway next to the airport, people standing outside their vehicles watching the drama unfold in the sky. "Raptor 2122, break off on my mark," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. 3, 2, 1, mark. Brennan and Tors pulled away simultaneously, their Raptors banking hard left and right, peeling off from the 777 like synchronized dancers. The sudden loss of their pressure support made the aircraft lurch. Sarah felt it in her hands, felt the yoke go even mushier as she lost that artificial control authority. But they were 500 feet above the runway, close enough, maybe. The threshold passed beneath them, runway numbers 21 painted in white. The main landing gear kissed the concrete first, not a gentle touchdown but a controlled slam that sent shockwaves through the airframe. Inside the cabin, passengers screamed as they were thrown forward against their seatbelts. "Thrust reversers," Sarah shouted. Park activated them. 2 of the 4 engines responded, their exhaust deflecting forward, creating braking thrust. The other 2 reversers were hydraulically locked, useless. The nose gear slammed down hard, too hard, an impact that made the entire cockpit shake. Metal screamed. Tires shrieked on concrete. The aircraft started to skid, yawing right, the runway centerline drifting left through the windscreen. Sarah's feet worked the rudder pedals uselessly, her hands fighting the yoke. They were sliding, hydroplaning on foam, 250,000 pounds of aircraft with almost no braking capacity, barreling toward the end of the runway at 150 miles per hour. The runway end markers appeared ahead, 3,000 feet remaining, 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet. They weren't going to make it. "Brace, brace, brace," Marcus Rivera shouted in the cabin. Sarah pulled the throttles to idle on the working engines, praying for any extra deceleration. Park was calling out their speed, 100 knots, 90, 80. 500 feet of runway left. The grass overrun beyond, then a chain-link fence, then trees. 70 knots, 60. 200 feet. 50 knots, 40. The aircraft shuddered, metal grinding but slowing. 100 feet of runway remaining when they finally stopped. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the whine of the 2 still-operating engines spinning down and the hiss of foam beneath the wheels. Then someone in the cabin started crying, then laughing, then everyone was screaming, not in terror now, but in joy, in disbelief, in the pure, overwhelming relief of being alive when they should be dead. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't release her grip on the yoke. Park was laughing and crying at the same time. Through the windscreen, she could see emergency crews sprinting toward them, fire trucks and ambulances converging, people running who'd expected to pull bodies from wreckage and instead were witnessing a miracle. Transpac 447, you are stopped safely on runway 21, Crescent City Tower said, the controller's voice breaking. Welcome to California, Captain. Welcome home. Sarah found her voice. Raptor 2122, thank you. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it, but thank you. Our honor, Captain, Brennan replied. All passengers safe. Marcus Rivera was already moving through the cabin, checking injuries. Bruises, maybe a broken arm or two from the hard landing, but everyone was conscious, everyone was breathing. All passengers accounted for and safe, Sarah reported, tears streaming down her face now. 183 souls all alive. But even as relief flooded through her, even as passengers began standing on shaky legs, hugging each other, crying and laughing and thanking God, Sarah's mind went to the man who'd made it all possible. Raptor 21, what's Ghost Rider's status? There was a long, terrible pause. Captain, Brennan said quietly, Ghost Rider's F-15 went down 20 miles west of here. No ejection observed. Search and rescue has been dispatched, but... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Sarah closed her eyes, grief mixing with gratitude. Marcus Thorne, Ghost Rider, had saved 183 people. But at what cost? 20 miles west of Crescent City, Marcus Thorne's powerless F-15X fell toward a beach like a wounded eagle. No engines. Minimal hydraulics. No ejection, because ejecting meant losing the aircraft, losing billions in classified technology, exposing Project Guardian Angel to the world. So he flew. His emergency flight control system gave him just enough authority to turn the falling fighter into a glider. Through his canopy, he could see a stretch of isolated beach, maybe 1,000 feet of sand between rocky outcrops. No good options, but better than the alternative. This is either going to be my best landing or my last, he muttered to himself. The F-15 dropped through 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet. The beach rushed up at him. At the last second, Thorne pulled back on the stick, flaring the nose, converting his last bit of airspeed into lift. The fighter jet's belly scraped across sand, grinding, shrieking metal, throwing up a rooster tail of sand and debris. The aircraft skipped once, twice, then slammed down hard. The landing gear, never designed for beach landings, collapsed immediately. The F-15 slid on its belly, carving a 300-foot trench through the sand before finally shuddering to a stop 50 feet from the rocky outcrop that would have killed him. Thorne sat in the cockpit for 10 seconds, checking himself. Everything hurt, but everything worked. No fire, no fuel to burn anyway. He was alive. Above him, he heard the distinctive sound of helicopters inbound, search and rescue, but also the other kind. The kind that wore no markings and answered to agencies that didn't officially exist. His radio crackled. Ghost Rider, this is Guardian Angel Command. Remain in aircraft. Recovery team is 2 minutes out. Thorne pulled his helmet off, running a hand through his sweat-soaked silver hair. Through his canopy, he could see a black helicopter approaching. Not Coast Guard orange, not Navy gray, but matte black with no identifying marks. Behind it, a Coast Guard chopper hung back, keeping its distance. The black helicopter landed in a storm of sand. 6 figures in tactical gear jumped out, moving with military precision toward the downed F-15. A portable crane was already being set up. They'd lift the entire aircraft, load it onto a transport plane waiting at a nearby military strip, and within 3 hours it would be as if the crash never happened. One of the figures approached Thorne's canopy, a woman in her 40s with colonel's insignia barely visible on her uniform. She made a hand signal, opened the canopy. Thorne pulled the manual release. The canopy lifted with a hydraulic hiss. "Colonel Thorne," the woman said, her voice professional but not unkind. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed." "I've been told it's a fine line," Thorne replied, unstrapping from his ejection seat. "How are the passengers?" "All 183 survived. Minor injuries only. You saved them." She paused. "You also exposed this entire program. The court-martial paperwork is already being prepared." Thorne nodded slowly. He'd known this was coming. "Worth it?" "Maybe." The colonel's expression softened slightly. "Get in the helicopter, Marcus. We need to disappear you. Again." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at a memorial service at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. The ceremony honored pilots who'd gone above and beyond the call of duty. Major Kyle Brennan and Captain Lisa Torres received Distinguished Flying Crosses for their role in saving Transpac Flight 447. Their photos would hang in the base's Hall of Honor. But there was no mention of Ghost Rider, no mention of Marcus Thorne. The official report credited experimental air traffic control procedures and exceptional piloting skill for the miracle landing. 3 fighter jets in formation around a crippled airliner had been scrubbed from the official narrative. Too many questions, too many classified answers. Sarah approached Brennan and Torres after the ceremony. The 3 of them had stayed in contact, bound by the experience that none of them could fully discuss publicly. "He should be here," Sarah said quietly, looking at their medals. "Ghost Rider should be getting the Medal of Honor." "He's getting something better," Torres replied, a slight smile on her face. She pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a photo that had been anonymously sent to her email that morning. The photo showed a man with silver hair standing in front of a fighter jet, not the black F-15X, but something newer, sleeker, more advanced. The man was smiling, giving a casual salute to the camera. On the back of the photo, visible in the image, were words written in pilot's scrawl. "Still flying, still watching. Tell Mitchell 183 reasons to break the rules, worth every one. Gr." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "He's alive." "Alive and probably breaking more rules somewhere," Brennan added. "I did some quiet digging. Project Guardian Angel still exists, still classified, still developing systems to do the impossible, and rumor has it they have a test pilot who's too stubborn to stay dead." In Honolulu, Emily Chen walked along the beach with her grandson Michael. They'd finally made it to Hawaii, on a different flight, 2 weeks after their original trip was interrupted by near death. Michael was chasing waves, laughing, alive in the way only an 8-year-old can be alive. Every night since the incident, Emily had told him the same bedtime story, about dragons who swooped from the sky to catch falling princesses, about brave knights who fought with wings instead of swords, about a ghost who rode the wind and saved people when nobody else could. "Grandma," Michael called, pointing at the sky where a military jet traced contrails across the blue. "Do you think the dragons are still watching?" Emily watched the contrails fade, thinking about 3 fighter jets in impossible formation, about a voice on the radio that should have been dead, about 183 people who walked away from certain death. "Yes, baby," she said, "I think they're always watching." At Pearl Harbor, Sergeant Marcus Webb held his 4-year-old daughter Sophie, reading her the bedtime story she requested every single night now. A made-up tale about a ghost pilot who saved her daddy from falling out of the sky. "Is the ghost pilot real, Daddy?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide. Marcus thought about the matte black F-15 that had held position behind their plane with precision measured in inches, about the pilot who'd flown until his engines died rather than let them fall, about the voice that had been calm and certain when everyone else was panicking. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, kissing her forehead. "Ghost Rider is real, and he's still out there somewhere making sure people get home safe." In a classified facility buried in a mountain somewhere in the American West, Colonel Marcus Reaper Thorne sat in a briefing room, looking at photographs of 183 people. Passengers from Transpac Flight 447. He'd memorized every face, every name, every story. Emily Chen and her grandson Michael, the Martinez newlyweds, Sergeant Webb and his daughter waiting at home, the cancer survivors, the high school students, all alive, all living the futures they should have lost. His commanding officer, the same colonel who'd pulled him from the beach 6 months ago, entered the room. "The court-martial proceedings have been dropped," she said. "The Secretary of Defense decided that publicly trying you would expose too much. You're officially reprimanded and confined to this facility for another 2 years minimum." Thorne nodded. 2 more years of being dead. 2 more years away from his family. 2 more years of existence in a mountain testing systems that didn't officially exist. "But," the colonel continued, her expression softening, "unofficial word from the top is that what you did, saving those 183 people, that's what this program was built for. Not to hide in mountains running simulations, but to be there when impossible is the only option." She placed a new patch on his desk. Ghost Rider, official call sign, officially recognized within the program. "Welcome back from the dead, Colonel. Again. Try not to die heroically for at least another few years, would you?" Thorne picked up the patch, running his thumb over the stitching. Outside his window, a small portal cut into the mountain, he could see a sliver of sky. Somewhere out there, 183 people were living their lives because he'd chosen to break every rule that mattered. He pinned the patch to his flight suit. "No promises," he said, smiling, "but I'll try." Because that's what ghosts do. They haunt the edges of possibility. They appear when needed most. They save the ones nobody else can reach. And they never, ever truly die. The end.